You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name is Trent and welcome to 2025. I cannot believe that we are now 7 calendar years in on this podcast. We've sent it all from the green shoots of episode 1 with Brendan Ptolemy back in December 2018, and now we are in 2025, where the theme of this year, as I've said before, is amenity. It's a state that should be capitalising on a couple of years of very good growth, way more immigration per capita than we've ever had, and a lack of ideas when it comes to solving our supply crunch in the housing market right now. The man who I want to spend my New Year's with is Rash Dhanjal from the agency. This guy sells over 300 properties a year in his team, and so I thought had pretty much the best scope when I'm asking this question that is one of the most listened to episodes every year. What do we think our top 10 growth suburbs will be for 2025? And we're having a bit of fun with it today. Rash is going to give his top 10. I'm going to give my top 10. And we might see some correlation. And to be clear, Rash and I haven't actually shared our notes yet. I have no idea what he's about to say. He has no idea what I'm about to say. So it would be great to see if there's any crossover at all. At the very least, if there's not, well, then there hopefully should be 20 suburbs that should be doing well enough in 2025, you'd like to think. Rash, mate, thank you for coming in. It's early 2025. You should be on holidays, but you never are. I hope you had a really nice time off over that Christmas break. Did you?
It was good. Didn't travel with the kids and airports and all that messy stuff. Managed to stay back, which is good, and was very busy over that break period. Looking forward to our chat. I agree with you. It's all about amenity, affordability, infrastructure, and all those fundamentals that make top 10 list as well. Interested to see what you say. And we've got a special one today. We've had robotics, the AI, pick their top 10 as well with the analytics. So
I forgot about that. So explain that. What did you do?
We've got all the numbers courtesy of Corelogic for last year's performances for all the suburbs, over 300 suburbs in Perth, and basically put a very rudimentary prompt in there and sent the data and said, you're an analyst and well respected in Perth, like Trent is. And can you come up with your top 10 suburbs that should be the hotspots in Perth?
You've asked ChatGPT to look back and then make a prediction going forward as to which they would choose might be the best, with no other context around that other than the data that's coming.
Other than the data and other than the fact that they have to act like know what they're doing. Might be a bit rudimentary in the prompt, but
it'll be fun to look at.
It'll be fun to look
and
at.
See again if there's any crossover. We've got 3 entities right now, you, me, and the computer,
and
who we're going to be having a crack at seeing what 2025 looks like. And one thing you just said there, which is great that we agree on, and one thing that has guided my top 10 for this year, is that we're going back to amenity. I think for the first time in a number of years, the preference is amenity. It's not what can I afford, what can I just get my foot in the door on. The FOMO is less prevalent across Perth now, and it's more just going to the fundamentals of, hey, is this priced properly? Are there more buyers than sellers in this market? And if so, it really should come down to, in my opinion, the 4 key amenity factors. Closeness to water, closeness to the city, proximity to great public schools, and proximity to great activity centres. Those are the 4 things that have always led the charge, in my opinion, when you strip it all back. And that's where I'm going to be going this year, Rash. And it really should reflect time frames like 2017, 2018, where the market had nothing other than amenity to offer at the time.
Yes, obviously a very tough market, and the markets that did really well. I clearly remember places like Duncraig always performed well through those periods. Great amenities, great schools, Kareen.
These might be a couple of...
Yes, or things around there as well.
Chips.
Yes. The other thing I think as well is important for us all to realize is, for the first time in the last couple of months, I think agents are looking to do more subject to sales as well. So that strategic move, the propensity for sellers is even higher now, because if you've made money out of your property, now you'll say, okay, this was my first home. Where do I really want to be?
Yeah, so a lot of transactions now are going to be people going from somewhere to somewhere else, which
100%.
will involve more subject to sale contracts, and sellers are going to have to start getting used to that again, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or bridging loans as well. So we've seen a lot of those come through as well, with great options for people to move into, a lot more supply in the market, and the absorption rate's been pretty good as well. As at the back end of last year, we were seeing about 1,000 plus transactions a week for a period there. But there was about 8-9 weeks where we had over 900 transactions a week, which relative to the supply, the absorption rate's still good.
Yeah, we're still seeing it right now. I made that call with Gary. I said a few weeks ago that whilst we did hit a high for the year of 5,600 properties on the market, that it would start to drop again as demand pushes on and supply starts to slow down as agents push their supply into January to get a few weeks off. And that's what we've seen. We've seen it pretty much peak at the 5,600 mark, and it's starting to come back down again. And I did speak a couple of weeks ago on the podcast with Shane Beaumont about how I made that prediction that the stock on market would have peaked at that 5,600 mark the week I made that prediction, and that it would start to drop off again as demand continues fervently in the 900 to 1,000 property a week space, but supply would be held back for a few weeks over Christmas as agents took a break or had a strategy of waiting until after Christmas at the very least. And we've seen that. We've seen the stock on market drop again, even though it had been picking up through spring selling season. Anyway, let's go straight into our top 10 picks for 2025. I'm pretty reticent to give a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I can certainly give you my top 10. But maybe we'll have a crack and see what happens. So do you want to start or should I start?
You go first.
Okay, so the first one that I think will be in the top 10 is a suburb called North Fremantle. Now, the reason I'm picking North Fremantle is because we know that it is a ripple effect neighbour of Cottesloe. We know Cottesloe is seeing ridiculous prices going through that place over the last few years. I also have observed that North Fremantle actually has seen a slight 2% drop in prices over the last 12 months. And that, for me, would simply be one thing. It's just affordability. Now, as interest rates start to drop, places like North Fremantle are places that in 2017, 2018 were making the top 10 list. And as people can afford it again, I think North Fremantle will be a place that people will be jumping back on, not only for their own amenity, but just as a ripple effect of people being able to get in the area instead of in Mosman Parks and Cottesloes that they may not be able to afford. Median house price in North Fremantle right now, $1.66 million, and quite an eclectic suburb when it comes to the offerings of it. Small one though, only 3,000 people in the whole suburb. What do you reckon?
Good pick. Good pick. And you've got a good point there. When the interest rates drop, you'll find a lot of people going to their aspirational suburbs, trying to figure out their finance. So, yeah, very good pick.
Your turn.
All right, I've got Ascot in my list. And the median house price in 2024 for Ascot was $840,000. I feel for houses, that's very undervalued for its location.
Riverside suburb.
Riverside suburb. And for some reason, Ascot doesn't get the attention that it should. And it only performed at 12.8% growth last year. So there's a lot of upside there. And I'd think of a first home buyer that's been on the outskirts of Perth, sell their property for $800,000 and be able to get so close to the city. It's a good buy. So I think there's lots of upside there. And also, let's not forget the racecourse development. A lot of people want to get in there before the amenity, and I think the smart money will start moving in there.
That's a really interesting pick there because it aligns with my prediction that across most of the local governments, people will be flocking to the best suburb in that local government. And you would say that Ascot's probably, in my opinion, the city of Belmont, the best suburb in that local government area. So it makes sense, mate. Nice choice. It'd be interesting to see how many people are flocking that way instead of maybe a Rivervale or a Kewdale, which I think will be competing for that money too. Next pick from myself is Leederville. Now, Leederville has seen about 18% growth in 2024, so it has made a run already. But again, Bob Hawke Senior High School zone, $1.3 million median house price, still accessible when you compare it to other neighbourly suburbs like your West Leedervilles, Wembleys, Floriettes, Mount Hawthorns as well. But so much to offer when it comes to amenity, not just Bob Hawke, which has changed the suburb. I think all those suburbs within that catchment area have another reason why you would live there. And they're not really making any more of them in Leederville. It's pretty packed up. But for the slight apartment increase you might see, which I actually don't think anything's going on in the suburb, in the apartment space right now, Leedy is chock-a-blocks. Again, a small suburb, only 3,000 people. So not huge amounts of property coming to market there. But yeah, I believe that, again, from an amenity point of view, when you strip it back, these are the sort of places people want to live. So Leederville is in my top 10 as well.
Very good pick, Trent.
Your
I like
turn.
it. Next one, of course, it was Rivervale, just the proximity to the city, having Burswood there, quite similar to Ascot, just undervalued, I feel, at $850,000 medium house price for a home. And it's had 20% growth. I just think it's super undervalued. So I think there's people that have make a decision to get closer to the city, more amenity will pick that. And that whole corridor is going to change.
So you're back in city of Belmont here.
Yeah, those two specifically.
It makes sense. Generally, when you look at a map, if you came from Sydney, you'd look at the city of Belmont and the prices there and scratch your head a little bit and go, hang on, it's between the city and the airport. It's pretty much riverside. You got all the amenity of the Belmont Forum, of the Gateway WA, works that have been done over the years. Why isn't it more expensive? And I think the reason it hasn't been is historically it's been middle to lower class people in terms of finances. And that changes over time when the amenity increases. People just push into there with the price points they need. Certainly an affordable suburb, when you look across the price points, I think the only thing that might hold Rivervale back is its housing mix has changed over the years. It's much denser when it comes to townhouses and small units these days. But because of that affordability factor, you might also have a nice little win there, I think.
Yep. And also, going back to Leederville, for example, 3,000 homes, the supply may still be an issue there. Sometimes the data is skewed. Obviously, we're looking at a medium house price. You have to really deep dive into the specific properties to see, because if you don't get supply in the market, you can't have growth.
That's right.
That's the other issue as well. I think supply will be important in all these suburbs for them to perform as well. But yeah, it's really interesting. What did you have next on your list?
Trig. So back in 2017-18 again, and you'll start to see a theme with where I'm going here. Trig was one of the highest performing suburbs amongst nearly no other good performing suburbs. Why? A lot of renewal happening in the suburbs and big mansions coming in, so the data again a bit skewed. We're just replacing old crappy houses with bigger, better houses that are worth more, so the data gets skewed. But at the face of it, it has the same amenity as a city beach, as a Waterman's Bay, better houses than Scarborough, less of a mix than Scarborough in the housing side of things. It's quieter as well, generally.
And let's not forget,
it benefits from those areas too. So
Karrinyup Shopping Centre as well.
Yeah, Karrinyup Shopping Centre, the Hammersley Golf Course has just been redeveloped, open in the last few weeks. And Trig only saw a 10% increase in prices last year. So I think it's due. It's at time again. The median house price is at $2 million, so it's not cheap these days. But yeah, Trig is my pick. Trig is my third pick in the top 10.
And Trig's actually at $2 million is also very good value, if you think about it.
Yeah,
compared to
the
others.
houses that are there these days. For sure.
No, very good. I've got another two picks, but there are three suburbs, and I'll just run them through together. And this is because of schools and amenities. We've had recent changes in the last few years in Harrisdale, PR Waters, and Southern River, with the Rosemoyne and Wilton Senior High School principals moving into those areas. And if you compare the medium house prices in those areas versus their counterparts like Riverton and Willerton, there's a significant $500,000 difference there. If you value your kids' education, a lot of families are looking, okay, if we can't get in there, that's the second best place to go.
So you think people are chasing the principal?
100%.
That's big. That's very hyper-local knowledge there, Ash.
Yes.
These suburbs have already had a run. Do you think the local population can sustain those price points moving into what is close to the $1 million mark, if that's the case?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at those catchments, all these three suburbs have specific locations within the locations, and Harrisdale's had 19% growth, PR Waters has had 17%, and Southern River only 12.4%. They haven't had...
Not out of this world. It's below median growth this year, all of them are below median growth.
100%. So I think there's a lot of upside still there, and I'm very bullish on these. And looking at the communities that buy in Willerton, Riverton, and the Rosemoyne area, they will pivot to that if they can't find the options as well.
Okay, so that was Harrisdale, Southern River, and PR Waters.
PR Waters,
okay,
yes.
That's three, bang. My next pick is City Beach. City Beach, obviously not too far from Trig, only had a 6.4% increase last year. Why? Mainly affordability. It's a $3 million median house price now, but the rental growth last year was 30%. You're renting a property in City Beach for $1,300 a week, which just to compare it, is actually the same as what you're renting a property for in Iluka, which is pretty crazy when you think about Iluka. Another 30 k's up the road. Why City Beach? Most of the suburbs around it made 20 to 25%. Floreat, Scarborough, Swanbourne have all gone up in that 20 to 25% range. Big houses that you can't replace for the same cost. It's, I guess, a comparable to Cottesloe in a lot of ways in terms of the house you're going to get, the view you're going to get. It doesn't offer the same township or the same accessibility to the water given West Coast Drive's in the way, which is why City Beach I think will always be a bit cheaper. But Cottesloe's just had this ridiculous run in the last few years that I think you're going to start to see people going, man, 10 mil for that in Cottesloe, I can get this for 6 mil in City Beach. Let's just do that. Yeah, I think there's a lot to go in City Beach just because of where that affordability sits. Okay, so that's my fourth pick. I owe you two more now that you've run across.
Yes, go for it.
My next one is, ironically, Ross Moyne and Riverton. I'll pack those two in so that we get even. And I guess it talks to the same ideas that you were thinking about, is finding the best school zones in Perth, and that being one of those top 4 reasons why people go there. And Riverton made, this is going to kick me in the arse here a little bit, 38% last year, one of the highest performing suburbs. It's now got a median house price of $1 million. But I strongly believe that interest rates dropping helps people access this suburb a bit more. Ross Moyne only made 10% last year, and that's because it's at 1.65. But when you think about it, Riverside suburb, it's $1.64 million for some of those properties in Ross Moyne as a median is undervalued. That suburb is undervalued for what you're getting, with most of the other suburbs like Bull Creek, Shelley, Willerton all made 22 to 28% last year. Ross Moyne made 10. I think that Ross Moyne is going to get a big push, and you're going to get some splash zone into Riverton. And why? Because of Ross Moyne Senior High School. It's really interesting that we're thinking the same thing there, mate. Are we at 6 suburbs now between those?
I think so. I've got a couple here. I might just put them together as well. My next one's Padbury and Craigie.
They pretty much come hand in hand, don't they?
Yes, and the reason is next door Hillary's is medium house price for a home now is sitting around the 1.25, and Padbury's at 920, and Craigie's at 800,000. If you can't get that close to the beach and you can't get into Hillary's, these are great options. Duncraig, for example, is at 1.25 million for a home as well now. I feel like there's going to be a lot more activity there.
Are you nervous about how far they've already run? We were making that call in 2020 that Padbury, Craigie, Belden, Heathridge would be absolutely booming, and they have for the last 4 years, right? They've had about 70-80% growth in the last 4 years. They've been a top performer, that whole city of Joondalup, east of Marmy and Wing, that goes through there, right? At some point, does it not get a bit expensive for that local population? Or do you go, well, it is what it is?
It is what it is, and there's a lot of local families, people moving from overseas that want to be closer to their families, the English, British people,
Yep.
South African. There's good schools as well. Fundamentally, it's solid. Look how close it is to the city. It's not far at all. And you're next to the beach as well. So I think strongly, if you look at those suburbs, there's still a lot of upside. It's still good buying.
Okay, so you've given me 7 and 8 there. I'm going to have to give you the same. So the next one I'm going to give you is Willerton, and for the same reason as Ross Moyne and Riverton. Back in the start of this cycle, when there was no reason to buy a property other than amenity, Willerton was cracking on. It's a suburb that is the only suburb within the Willerton Senior High School catchment, and again, highly respected. Its growth rate was 28% last year, so it's starting to get expensive at $1.2 million, but it's in line with all of its suburbs around it. Parkwood 30%, Leeming 26%, Canningvale 20%, Bull Creek, like all of these guys are doing well from, I think, just generally tracking with the median house price. But there's no reason why Willerton doesn't just keep cracking on. There's a very particular, especially Asian population that is pushing into Willerton as they can afford it. And then when they can't afford it, they go to Parkwood and Leeming and these sort of areas as that periphery. But again, interest rates coming down, it just opens the floodgates for this to continue to happen. So that's my pick number 7. Pick 8 for me is Shenton Park. Now, the reason I go for Shenton Park is it is an absolute ball terror of a suburb. For most of the last 5 years, Shenton Park has been the fastest selling suburb in Perth. It's had a couple of breathers along the way in terms of a year off of price growth, but 2024 was 22%. It's now got a median sales price of $2 million. And I remember properties in those areas pretty much were low ones at the start of this boom. So you do ask the question, Trent, can we sustain this? I would suggest that with a rental growth of 38% last year, and a population of people who are buying in that are essentially doctors, at the end of the day, getting close to the hospital, affordability isn't a huge issue. And it tracks very closely with Daglish and Jolimont, who have made pretty much the same growth. I believe that whole area, if I could pick a few more suburbs, it would have also been Daglish and Jolimont in there. As interest rates go down, doctors are making more every year. They can afford more with interest rates going down. You go to those highest amenity suburbs, and you actually don't have to try and imagine these things or make these things up. Just look back to where it was at the start of this boom, when that's all there was to talk about. And Shenton Park was at the top of the list for years in a row. And that's why Shenton Park is the 8th pick in my top 10.
And yeah, you mentioned it for years on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
So good pick, that one.
Your turn, mate.
Maylands is another one. Again, Riverside suburb, and still
What's
tracking
the median house price in Maylands now?
965.
That talks to an eclectic housing type in Maylands, because you can see properties that are double that price.
Yeah,
There's also a lot of units in that back end in Bayswater as well, probably holding the median down a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. But when I picked the data, I looked at houses specifically to try and pull the units out of it. But 965 still undervalued for homes in the area. So I think that's another one that, again, like Ascot, but probably not as bad as Ascot.
Yeah.
But people just don't see the value in it. There's a lot of value in there as well.
And a lot of choice, and just a great little spot. Maylands, at the end of the day, I'm not sure it's changed much in its amenity offering, but its amenity offering has always been quite good, very accessible for the city as well. All right, my pick 9 is Bicton. Bicton was a big pick again a few years ago. It has fantastic offerings in terms of its location. It's one of those top picks in that Fremantle location. If you can't get into Applecross, if you can't get into Adderale, you go into Bicton. And to be honest, a lot of people prefer Bicton over Adderale. It only made 7% last year. Its median house price, I think, is quite surprising. It's 1.4 mil. I thought it'd be a lot more than that. And when you look at the area, Adderale went up 23% last year. I think we're just going to get a bit of ripple effect into Bicton. Melville and Palmyra made high teens as well. Bicton was having a big move at the start of this boom and has slowed down a bit, and I think it's mainly just affordability. So with rates dropping, people flock back to the places they'd rather be, and Bicton has always been a choice. That's my number 9, mate.
Good pick. Now, I'm surprised you didn't have this one on your list yet. Mount Lawley.
Oh, I have to give it away. I wrote Mount Lawley down and crossed it out.
Why is that?
It's a smoky for me. I think just if I had 15 to pick, it'd be in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just made the list. You can see it. I actually wrote Mount Lawley, crossed it out, and put Bicton. And probably for the same reasons you're about to say.
Yeah.
School zone's great and the best suburb in its area. So it makes sense, exactly what I've been saying. People will be flocking to the best places they can find as their affordability increases next year. Any other reasons why you'd picked it?
Yeah, I just think just a lifestyle. People want to be around the nice restaurants and access to all that. And it's very aspirational. So as interest rates drop, people will start making moves to decide to get in the area.
Love it. My last pick, and it could be my number 1 pick, it could be my number 10 pick, to be honest, Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant, again, was one of those suburbs that was flying at the start of this boom when people were choosing for amenity reasons, not affordability, because everything was affordable in 2019. It's gone up 21% last year, so it's not something that's been left behind. But $1.8 million, it is still cheap buying compared to Applecross, and you get the same amenities. Most people in Applecross don't have a view anyway. So yeah, I think people are going to be flocking back to a suburb that was flying 5 years ago and is still at 21%, not doing bad at all. But that one rounds up my top 10, mate.
Good one. I'm going to take the last one as Brabham, and there's a couple of reasons. Metronet's just started this year, and it's had 30% growth, but there's been a new announcement for a new high school in the area. So anyone that's trying to get their kids to go to high school, there's not many high schools around the area. So
it's lacking in that amenity at the moment,
yes,
isn't it?
so you'll find a lot of families that have kids in primary school that will be buying in there and pushing the prices up so that they can get into the high school in the future. So there you go. There's the top 10.
Interesting that we didn't have any crossover, but I think because we're coming from two different perspectives, property developer versus selling agent, and it's great to know that the listeners have got 20 suburbs to look at there. What I want to hear is what ChatGPT had to say. Give us the list, mate.
So
Did we
this
have
one,
any crossover there?
actually, I don't think we did. We'll start Peppermint Grove. So ChatGPT thinks that Peppermint Grove is going to grow. Dalkeith, Cottesloe, City Beach,
City Beach is a
Swanbourne.
crossover.
Yeah, it
There's
is. Yeah, correct. Swanbourne, Applecross. You mentioned Mount Pleasant, Nedlands, Waterman's Bay, Mosman Park, and Mount Claremont.
So it's pretty much picked the top 10 of house prices, median house prices in Perth.
And also picked, I reckon, the lowest growth
in last year. And again, why was it the lowest growth? Look, for the most part, it wasn't because of amenity. I'd say Dalkeith is probably amenity. Nothing's happening in that place. It's a backwash, in my opinion, at the moment with the lack of investment into that suburb. But regardless, they've really just picked the areas with generally the most amenity in Perth. Water, closeness to the city, closest to good private schools, generally in those areas. And areas that have not received a lot of growth in the last year or two, which is because of affordability. So it makes sense that ChatGPT would make those decisions, and I'm happy that it's aligned slightly with how I was thinking as well. But again, when you have 300 suburbs to choose from, you could probably ask 20 agents and there'd be
different opinions.
A number of opinions coming out there.
And one of the things that we noticed in the data as well is there's over 100 suburbs that 33% of the Perth markets now, family homes or houses, are above $1 million in medium house price. And another 30% sit between $800 to $1 million. If you're looking to get a family home, you're going to have to spend minimum 800 grand to get in a house. So that affordability piece is very important for us this year. And for us to get the market moving, interest rates have to drop as well.
That's right. Interest rates have to drop, I think, also to get people building. The minimum cost for a family home these days is about $800,000. And at the start of this boom, it was more like $450,000, $500,000. That is because 400 square meters of land costs about 400 grand these days, most parts in Perth at least. And a family home costs at least 400 grand to build, turnkey, at least. We need that median price in a lot of suburbs to be higher than that, just for people to actually consider building as a smart decision. I hope we see more construction next year, because if we don't, we're going to continually have conversations about 20% growth every year.
We need supply. We've got a population growth. The theme's still the same. Build more houses and get comfortable building houses, because we do need the supply.
All right, piece of advice, Rash, as one of the most prolific sellers in Western Australia, advice to your sellers for 2025. If you want to get the most people through the door and the most offers, therefore the most power as a seller, what would your advice be in terms of how a seller approaches a transaction in 2025?
Be open to a bit more flexibility around pricing. So price it well. Don't overcook the price. Presentation and the fundamentals of how you present your home are going to be significant this year. So it goes back to the basics, the fundamentals. Do you price it well? You have to watch the number of people coming through the door. That tells a story. Listen to your agent. You might end up at the same price you wanted, but it'll need flexibility from sellers. A lot of sellers have a price in mind and that might sit outside the market, and that will be the worst thing for their campaigns. Because in this market, when properties sell quickly, sellers that have overpriced properties and they sit on the market for longer, the market starts thinking there's something wrong with the property, and for that they'll punish you.
Yeah, because they go, well, there's no reason this should be sitting on the market. We know that everything's selling quickly, so there must be something wrong with it. You mentioned before as well that subject to sale flexibility. Do you think as sellers, given the transitional nature of purchasing and selling this year in WA for people upgrading and downsizing, that reality of subject sale is just going to have to be a bit more considered now?
Yeah, 100%. I think the propensity for sellers to take on subject sales are going to improve, and also for agents to be pitching it back to their clients as well, because there's a lot of moving parts. We know at the back end of last year, we were doing a lot of subject sales because we wanted the stock to move, and it did. So it's a smart decision. You just have to do your due diligence on the buyer and their pricing as well, and have enough information to make a sound decision on whether they're the best people to go with.
And buyers, what's our advice for buyers this year? We obviously have a bit more choice than last year. I think it needs to be made clear as well that this isn't 2018, mate. You aren't in control. Until we are building enough houses, this is still going to be a seller's market.
I think buyers also forget that in the last couple of years, it's been crazy to buy. As soon as they see more supply and more options, they start acting differently. So buy houses. That's the thing. You have to buy a property, get in there, get your hands dirty, and purchase something and get out of the market. It's that simple.
The market is still moving, and it will move at least 1% per month as you continue to wait and be picky and choose your best option. So definitely do make sure you're making a smart choice for yourself. Don't go and overpay, but also make sure that if you have to, you meet the seller. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen for you and you'll continue to miss out.
100%.
Rash, have a great year in 2025, mate. Thank you for coming in so early in 2025. Most people are off on holidays, and I appreciate your time, mate. So look forward to having a chat with you further in the year to get an update on how well we're going with our predictions.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!